During our father-daughter dance, my girl slipped a frantic note into my pocket. "Dad, help me." The groom thought he was scamming a broke old man, but he just declared war on a hidden multi-millionaire who plays for keeps. Before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The fork paused halfway to my mouth as Michael Bradford stared at my living room wall again. My future son-in-law was tracking the corner where I kept my desk with the hungry eyes of a wolf looking at a lamb. He set his fork down with theatrical precision, the silver clinking against the china like a challenge. "You know, James," he said, leaning back in my chair like he already owned the title deed to the house. "With your retirement savings just sitting in some bank account earning nothing, I could show you real opportunities. My fintech connections could triple your returns." I looked at him, then at my daughter Amanda. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her hand finding her water glass but not lifting it. I smiled the way I had learned to smile during 40 years of watching people try to sell me forgeries in the high-stakes art world. "That is kind of you, Michael, but at my age I prefer boring and safe." He laughed, a sound far too loud for my small dining room in the Richmond district. "Boring and safe? That is exactly the problem with your generation. Money should work for you." 6 months ago, Amanda had brought him home for the first time. I remembered standing in this same doorway, watching him park his Tesla with unnecessary drama. The chrome gleamed like a promise he could not keep. He had gripped my hand with the enthusiasm of a politician, his watch catching the light. It was an expensive brand, fresh from the store, without a single scratch on the casing. While Amanda made coffee, I had watched him survey my house the way auction appraisers examine estate sales, cataloging and calculating the value of my life. "Successful fintech entrepreneur," Amanda had whispered to me in the kitchen, her eyes bright with a hope I had not seen in years. "He has an office in the financial district." I had nodded, noting how his designer suit hung just a little too perfectly. There was no wear at the cuffs and no history in the fabric. It was new money trying to look like old money, except I suspected Michael Bradford had neither. Now, 2 weeks before the wedding, he was pushing harder. "I am serious, James. You could be making real money instead of consulting for whatever you charge. What is it, like $50 an hour?" Amanda's face flushed a deep red. "Michael, I am just saying your dad has worked hard his whole life." "He deserves better returns," Michael interrupted, his voice smooth as oil. I stood up to collect the plates with deliberate calm. "Does anyone want more wine?" Michael excused himself to the bathroom, and I watched his reflection in the dark window. He paused by my desk, his phone out, angling for a shot of the papers I had deliberately left visible. Those papers were bank statements for my checking account, the one that showed a comfortable but unimpressive balance. He did not photograph the shelf above where my stamp album sat, dismissed as an old man's hobby. When he returned, Amanda was helping me in the kitchen. Through the partially open door, I heard him on his phone, his voice carrying that particular satisfaction of someone who thinks they are getting away with a heist. "85,000 for a wedding," he said. "The old man is loaded." There was a pause on the other end. Jennifer, probably his sister, my daughter's new best friend. "Just be patient," Michael said, his voice dropping to a low hiss. "Amanda is the key. She trusts me completely." I rinsed a dish, the water running cold over my hands. Amanda was laughing at something on her phone in the other room, oblivious and happy. I had spent $85,000 on their wedding at the Meadowood Napa Valley Resort because she had looked at the venue photos with such joy. I had written checks for upgrades, for Jennifer's vendor contacts, and for every suggestion Michael made while he and his sister exchanged glances. I was not supposed to notice. After they left, Amanda hugged me at the door with genuine warmth. I sat alone with my stamp collection in the silence of the house. The penny black under my magnifying glass was worth $180,000 by itself. The full collection, assembled over 30 years as JS in the international art and collectibles market, was worth $8 million. Michael had glanced at these albums once, made a dismissive comment about old stamps, and never looked again. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a number I had not called in months. Jessica Martinez, my old friend and attorney, answered on the second ring. "James, it is late. I need you to keep an ear out about someone," I said. Do not explain why yet. Just listen. Who? Michael Bradford says he is a fintech entrepreneur with an office in the financial district. Jessica was quiet for a moment, the sound of her shifting papers coming through the line. I will make some calls, she said, her voice shifting into the sharp mode she used for litigation. I hung up and returned to my stamps. 40 years in the art world had taught me to spot a fake from across the room. Michael Bradford's performance was good, but it was not masterpiece level. The question was no longer whether he was a fraud. The question was what exactly he was after and how deep the blade went. I thought about Amanda's text from earlier that day. Dad, I am so happy. The wedding was in 2 weeks. I could stop it now, confront them, and shut it down. But I had learned patience in my years of acquiring rare pieces. You do not grab at the first offer. You wait. You watch. You let the other party reveal their full hand. I closed the stamp album, my hand resting on millions of dollars Michael had dismissed as worthless. Whatever he was planning, I would let it play out just long enough to see the full picture. Then, I would act. The game was already in motion, and Michael just did not know he was playing against a master. The Meadowood Napa Valley Resort looked like a spread from a wedding magazine. Oak trees and stone pathways lined the hills, with vineyard views stretching toward the horizon. March sunshine filtered through the leaves, warm but not hot. It was the kind of perfect weather that money cannot buy, but luck sometimes provides. 180 guests filled the reception hall, champagne glasses catching the light and laughter rising in waves. I stood at the edge of the dance floor watching Amanda in her white dress, and the wrongness of it all settled in my chest like a lead stone. She looked beautiful, radiant even. The dress fit perfectly, and her hair was swept up just the way she had planned for months. But when the band started playing and the guests cleared the floor for our father-daughter dance, I saw what no one else did. Her hands were trembling as she placed them on my shoulders. "Dad," she whispered, her smile frozen for the cameras that were flashing all around us. I took her hand and began the slow rotation expected of us. 200 eyes were watching. $85,000 had gone into creating this perfect moment, and my daughter's fingers were shaking against mine like trapped birds. She leaned close, her voice barely audible over the music. "Read it when you are alone, please, Dad." An envelope slipped into my jacket pocket so smoothly that I almost missed the movement. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. They were desperate, apologetic, and terrified. I kept dancing. I kept smiling. I finished the song and kissed her forehead. Then I walked with measured steps toward the restroom, my heart hammering against my ribs. The lock clicked shut behind me. I braced my hands on the marble counter and pulled out the envelope with fingers that had gone suddenly cold. It was hotel stationery. Amanda's handwriting was shaky but clear. "Dad, help me." 3 days ago, I overheard Michael on the phone with Jennifer. He said he is marrying me for your money, that I am an easy target, and that after the wedding, he will convince me to put you in a nursing home to access your savings. I did not know what to do. Everything is paid for. Everyone is here. Please stop this. I read it twice. In the mirror, my reflection changed. Something shifted behind my eyes, a hardness that had not been there in 15 years, not since I had stepped away from the art world's brutal negotiations and chosen a quiet life for Amanda's sake. I remembered teaching her to dance when she was 7, her small feet balanced on my shoes, trusting me to keep her safe. That trust had never wavered, not when her mother left, not through all the years of modest living while I hid what I really had. She had trusted me to protect her one more time. I folded the note with precise movements and tucked it back into my pocket. I straightened my tie. When I opened the bathroom door, I was someone different. I was someone Michael Bradford should have researched much more carefully. The reception hall buzzed with conversation and the clinking of glasses. I found Michael at the bar, surrounded by 3 friends in rental tuxedos. They were all laughing at something he had just said, and he looked like a man who had already won the lottery. Old man's money well spent, right? Michael's voice carried over the crowd. At least the free booze is top shelf. His friends laughed, and one clapped him on the shoulder. "You are terrible, Bradford," the friend said. "I am smart," Michael replied, grinning into his glass. "There is a difference. I give it 6 months before we have full access to his accounts. Amanda will sign anything I ask." I was standing 10 feet behind him. Several guests had noticed me, their expressions shifting from amusement to sharp discomfort. Michael did not see their faces change. He was too drunk on his own cleverness and expensive whiskey. I walked to the stage where the band had set up. The microphone was there, waiting for the toasts. I picked it up. The music stopped mid-note. Silence crashed over the reception hall like a cold wave. "This wedding is canceled." My voice came out calm, cold, and absolute. 180 faces turned toward me in a single motion. Michael's confusion was almost comical. His mouth opened, his glass was halfway to his lips, and his brain was trying to process the sudden stop of his world. "I have information that makes this marriage impossible." I let the words hang there. I let them sink in. "Amanda, come with me." "Wait, what?" Michael's face drained of color as he stumbled away from the bar. "James, you cannot just—" I looked at him. I just looked. He stopped talking immediately. Jennifer appeared beside her brother, her hand gripping his arm and her expression frozen in horror. She knew. Somehow she knew I had found out. Amanda was already moving toward me, her dress rustling against the floor and tears streaming down her face. I extended my hand and she took it. We walked through 180 stunned guests. Phones were coming out now, cameras capturing the collapse of the Bradford dream. Michael's voice rose behind us, stammering protests that convinced no one. "Amanda, wait! Your father is confused. He does not understand." Jennifer hissed something at him. "Shut up! Don't make it worse." "How could it be worse?" Michael yelled. "He knows, somehow he knows." The parking lot air hit us cool and clean. I opened the car door for Amanda. I looked back once at the resort entrance. Michael burst through the doors with Jennifer trying to pull him back. Guests were spilling out with phones raised like witnesses at a crime scene. I drove away, and in the rearview mirror, I saw Michael fall to his knees on the pavement. 180 people were watching his world collapse into the Napa dirt. Amanda cried quietly in the passenger seat. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "It is going to be okay," I said simply. "But first, they need to understand they made a very serious mistake." I woke at 5 the next morning, my bedroom still dark and the fog rolling in off the bay. Amanda was asleep down the hall in her childhood room, the one I had kept exactly as she had left it when she moved out years ago. I made coffee in the quiet kitchen, the ritual movements automatic, while my mind cataloged what needed to happen next. Michael Bradford had tried to con my daughter. He had planned to institutionalize me. The wedding had cost me $85,000 that I would never see again, but that was just the entry fee for the game he had started. I sat at my desk and pulled out Amanda's note. The paper trembled slightly in my hand, not from fear, but from a controlled fury that needed a direction. I texted Jessica Martinez. "Need to see you this morning, urgent." Her response came within 2 minutes. My office, 9 a.m. Jessica's law firm occupied the 15th floor of a building on Montgomery Street. I had known her for 30 years, since she was a junior associate, and I was building my art collection under a pseudonym. She had helped me structure my anonymity when I decided to step back from that world. Her corner office overlooked the bay, the morning light turning the water to silver. She stood when I entered, her expression already serious. Jessica had excellent instincts for reading emergencies. I handed her Amanda's note without preamble. She read it twice, her jaw tightening with every word. "Elder financial abuse," she said. "That is a felony in California. But we need evidence beyond this note. We need to know who we are dealing with." "That is why I am here," I told her. "I need everything on Michael Bradford and his sister Jennifer." Jessica pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "I will start with public records, civil cases, and credit reports where I can access them. But James, if this goes legal, there are protective measures we should implement immediately for you and Amanda." She looked at me, and I saw recognition in her eyes. She remembered who I really was and what I was really worth. "They picked the wrong target." "Yes," I said. "They did." That afternoon, I walked next door to my neighbor Bob Chen's house. Bob was 70 and had retired from the San Francisco Chronicle after 40 years of investigative journalism. We had played chess every Wednesday evening for the past decade. He answered the door in his usual cardigan, his reading glasses hanging from a chain around his neck. "James, you look terrible," he said. "Can I come in?" Over tea in his cluttered living room, I told him everything. Not about my hidden wealth, but the basics of the con and the plan to put me away. Bob's reporter instincts activated immediately, his eyes sharpened and his posture straightened. "Give me 3 days," he said. "If there is dirt, I will find it." "Bob, I cannot pay you for this," I started. He waved me off with a snort. "You think I would charge for this? Some punk tries to institutionalize my chess partner? I still have sources everywhere. Courthouse contacts, financial records access. This is what I do." The next 2 weeks moved with brutal efficiency. Jessica called on day 4. "Michael has 3 outstanding business loans totaling $1.5 million, all with different institutions." Bob stopped by on day 7 with a printout from a contact in Nevada. Las Vegas casino debts of $800,000 through a high roller line of credit he defaulted on. Jessica again on day 9 reported IRS tax liens of $300,000, and Jennifer Bradford had $400,000 in debts from failed real estate deals. Bob delivered his full dossier on day 12, setting a manila folder on my kitchen table with visible satisfaction. "The Tesla is leased," he said. "The financial district office is just $500 a month for a co-working desk. His startup filed for bankruptcy 14 months ago. And here is the interesting part. He was engaged 2 years ago to a woman from a wealthy Marin County family. The engagement ended suddenly with a sealed settlement." I opened the folder and studied the documentation. Tax records, business filings, and credit reports. Michael Bradford's entire fraudulent life was laid bare in 50 pages. "There is a pattern," I said quietly. "Oh yeah," Bob replied. "This is not his first rodeo. You want me to push deeper?" "Not yet," I said. "Let me think about how to use this." By mid-April, I sat in my home office with evidence folders spread across my desk. Jessica visited that evening with legal strategies, restraining orders, and fraud documentation. Bob had brought me contact information for his old colleagues who specialized in business fraud stories. I studied Michael's photo from a Facebook printout. He had a young, handsome, confident smile. It was the smile of someone who thought he was cleverer than everyone around him. "You thought I was just an old man with some savings," I said to the photo. "Big mistake." Amanda appeared in the doorway with tea. "Dad, you have been in here for hours." I closed the folders. "Just some paperwork," I told her. She set the cup beside me and hesitated. "Are you okay? You have been so quiet." "I am gathering information," I said. "When you move against someone, you need to know everything." "Move against? What are you planning?" I looked at my daughter. She was 33 years old, a schoolteacher, kind and trusting, and she had been hurt by someone who used those qualities against her. "Justice," I said simply. "He tried to use you and tried to cage me. That requires consequences. But first, I need the full picture." She nodded slowly and left me to my work. I opened my laptop and pulled up an email I had drafted earlier to Richard Preston, a VP at Wells Fargo. I had helped him authenticate a disputed Rothko for the bank's art holdings years ago. It was time to cash in that favor. "Richard," I wrote, "I am wondering if you might review some concerning information about potentially fraudulent loan documentation." I attached a file Bob had prepared. Facts only, no accusations. I hit send. My phone buzzed immediately. It was Michael's number. Another attempt to call Amanda. I watched it ring through to voicemail. Let him wonder. Let him worry. The trap was set. Tomorrow, the first piece would fall. 4 days into our investigation period, my doorbell rang at 10 in the morning. I checked the camera feed on my phone. Michael Bradford stood on my porch with grocery store flowers, the cheap kind wrapped in cellophane. They were a far cry from the expensive arrangements he had brought when he was courting Amanda. I opened the door but did not invite him in. "James," his smile looked rehearsed. "I think there has been a terrible misunderstanding. Whatever you heard, whatever Amanda said, we can work this out. I love your daughter." "No misunderstanding," I said. My voice was flat and cold. No workout, no second chances. Do not come back. I closed the door. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a full minute. His face cycled through confusion, anger, and calculation. He was sweating despite the cool morning. His clothes looked cheaper too. The designer labels had been replaced with department store brands. The pressure was already showing. April 15th arrived with perfect irony. Tax day was a fitting time for a man with $300,000 in IRS liens. Richard Preston at Wells Fargo had reviewed my information and made discreet inquiries to the 3 lending institutions that had given Michael his startup loans. All 3 discovered simultaneously that Michael's loan applications contained fabricated income statements and forged tax documents. 3 certified letters hit Michael's mailbox at once. I was not there to see it, but Bob's source at one of the banks described the phone calls that followed. Michael's voice rose from confusion to panic. He was demanding to speak with supervisors, insisting there must be mistakes. There were no mistakes. There was only $2.3 million in loans being called immediately. He had a 30-day deadline to pay or face legal action in bankruptcy proceedings. Michael called Jennifer from the bank's parking lot. Bob's contact heard him shouting into his phone through the glass doors. That evening, Jennifer showed up at my door. I did not answer. I watched her through the camera as she rang the bell repeatedly, finally leaving a handwritten note wedged in the doorframe. "We need to talk about Amanda's future," the note read. "This is between adults." I tore it in half and threw it away. The next day, an anonymous tip reached Bob's old colleague at the business section of a local paper. It was information about concerning patterns in local startup financing. It was vague enough to be legal, but specific enough that people in Michael's circle connected the dots. His scheduled meeting with a potential investor was canceled via text. His co-working space manager sent an email reviewing lease agreements due to member complaints. The Tesla leasing company sent a late payment notice. His automatic payment had bounced. Everything was closing in. I maintained my normal routine. Morning walks through Golden Gate Park, chess with Bob on Wednesday evenings, and cooking dinner for Amanda. She was slowly recovering her equilibrium. Bob dropped by on Saturday with updates, speaking quietly while Amanda was in the shower. "Your friend's startup office?" They asked him to vacate. Too many complaints about his business practices. "Word travels fast in small business communities," I said, "especially when someone makes sure it travels." Bob's eyes twinkled. "You want me to push harder?" "No," I told him. "Let it develop naturally. Desperation makes people careless. He will make mistakes." That evening, Amanda and I sat at the kitchen table with tea. She had been quiet all day, staring at her phone occasionally. "Michael came by last week, didn't he?" she asked. The doorbell camera recorded something. "He did," I said. I sent him away. "How do you feel about that?" She was quiet for a moment. "Relieved," she said. "Also sad. I really thought—" She shook her head. "But I heard what he said to Jennifer. I know what he planned." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You were kind," I said. "He took advantage. That is on him, not you. Remember that." Meanwhile, across the city, Michael and Jennifer were spiraling. Bob had a contact in Michael's apartment building who occasionally overheard conversations through the thin walls. Michael was pacing his living room at midnight. Jennifer's voice was sharp with stress. They had the calculator out and bills spread across the table. 3 separate institutions, Jennifer had said. Same day. Someone made this happen. "Who?" "The old man," Michael had replied with a brittle laugh. "He is a retired consultant living in Richmond. What power does he have? What do we actually know about him?" I researched him. Public records show a modest pension and Social Security. He lives in a house worth maybe $800,000. He is nobody. But doubt was creeping in. I could feel it like a change in the weather. They decided to fight back. They were going to sue me for emotional damages from the canceled wedding. Jennifer's idea probably. She was slightly smarter than her brother. "He will settle to avoid publicity," she had said. "We get something and pay down the debts." Michael had agreed immediately. "Yeah, he is old. He will cave." It was a fatal miscalculation. The email from Jessica Martinez arrived on a Tuesday evening. "They are suing you," it said. I opened the attachment. Michael Bradford was seeking $500,000 in emotional damages and lost wages. Jennifer had added her own claim for $100,000 in lost wedding planning fees. I started laughing. It was a sound that felt strange after weeks of tension. Amanda appeared in the doorway, worried. "Dad?" I looked up, wiping my eyes. "They just made the biggest mistake of their lives," I told her. "They are taking me to court." Her face fell. "That is not funny." "Don't worry," I said, still smiling. "They brought a knife to a gunfight and they don't even know I am armed." I forwarded the lawsuit to Jessica with one line, "Time to show them who they are dealing with." Her response came immediately. "Finally, I have been waiting for this." The process server arrived during breakfast the next morning. It was an official envelope with the Superior Court of California seal, Michael Bradford versus James Smith. Claim for $500,000 for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Amanda watched nervously as I read through the complaint. I was calm. I called Jessica. They sued me. Her voice was gleeful. "I know. I already have the documents. Can you come to my office in an hour? We are going to have some fun." At Jessica's law firm, she spread Michael's lawsuit across the polished table. "This is the best gift they could have given us," she said. Her eyes gleamed with professional satisfaction. By filing suit, they opened the door for discovery. We get to subpoena everything: bank records, communications, and past relationships, and we counter with elder financial abuse charges. That is a felony in California. "How fast can you move?" I asked. "I already filed for an emergency restraining order this morning," she said. "Hearings are this afternoon. The judge is going to love this." She pulled out Amanda's recording transcript and the evidence Bob had compiled. "We are countersuing for $5 million, Jessica said. "And yes, I am serious. California Welfare and Institutions Code Section 156 and 30. Elder financial abuse targeting someone 65 or older. Penalties include criminal charges and civil damages up to 3 times actual harm." "You are 65, she continued. "He planned to institutionalize you for your money. We have it on recording. $5 million is conservative." By 3 that afternoon, we stood in Superior Court. Michael and Jennifer appeared with an attorney who looked like he had taken the case that morning. He had a cheap suit and disorganized papers. The judge reviewed Jessica's emergency filing. She looked at Amanda's note and the recorded conversation transcript. She saw the evidence of Michael's debts and his fraudulent loan applications. Michael's attorney tried to argue this was a private family dispute. The judge cut him off. "This is alleged elder abuse," she said. "California takes this seriously." She looked directly at Michael. "Mr. Bradford, I have reviewed the evidence. Your alleged plan to institutionalize Mr. Smith to access his assets is deeply concerning." Michael's attorney stammered. "Your Honor, that is taken out of context." "Counselor, I have a recording transcript," the judge said. "Nursing home, full financial guardianship, access to his accounts. What context makes that acceptable?" There was silence in the room. "That is what I thought," the judge said. Jessica stood and presented our countersuit: fraud, attempted financial abuse of an elder, and conspiracy. $5 million in damages plus an immediate restraining order. 100 yards minimum distance from James Smith and Amanda Smith. Michael's face drained of color. Jennifer looked like she might be sick. The judge ruled from the bench. "Mr. Bradford, Miss Bradford, I am granting a temporary restraining order effective immediately. You are not to contact or approach within 100 yards of James Smith or Amanda Smith. Violation will result in immediate arrest." She looked down at her papers. "Furthermore, I am scheduling a preliminary hearing on the countersuit for May 15th. Mr. Bradford, given the evidence, I strongly advise you to secure competent legal counsel. This is serious." Michael tried to speak, but the judge was already moving on. "I am done, Mr. Bradford. Next case." Outside the courthouse, the spring sunshine felt harsh. We walked toward Jessica's car. Michael and Jennifer emerged moments later, standing on the courthouse steps. They were exactly 100 yards away by law. I could see them clearly. Michael was on his phone and Jennifer was crying. I leaned on my walking stick. I did not need it, but it emphasized my age nicely. Then I turned and looked directly at them across the plaza. I made eye contact with Michael and raised one hand in a small, cold wave. Then I smiled. Michael saw it. Our eyes met across the distance. In that moment, something shifted in his expression. It was recognition. It was fear. It was the beginning of understanding that he was not fighting a scared old man, but someone who had planned for this. I turned away and got into Jessica's car. She was already planning. May 15th, she said. They need to find a real attorney, which costs money they don't have. Meanwhile, the restraining order keeps them away. Will they fight or fold? I asked. Michael's ego says fight, Jessica replied. His empty bank account says fold. Either way, we win. That evening, Bob called. The courthouse filing is public, he said. I have friends at the Chronicle who might be interested in a story about elder financial abuse attempts. Want me to plant seeds? Not yet, I said. Let Michael make the next mistake first. He will. Desperation guarantees it. After hanging up, I sat with my stamp collection. I examined a rare Victorian-era stamp worth $150,000 through my magnifying glass. My hands were steady and my mind was clear. Michael and Jennifer were beginning to realize they had picked a fight with someone who had patience and resources. The restraining order meant they could not get close. The countersuit meant they were bleeding money they did not have. I placed the stamp carefully in its case. I had built this collection over decades through patience. Taking apart Michael Bradford's life would require the same skills. I had plenty of time. Michael, on the other hand, was watching the clock tick down toward total collapse. 3 weeks passed before I opened the letters. It was a Saturday morning in late August. Amanda brought me coffee and asked if I was finally ready to read them. I picked up the first envelope, seeing the return address from the federal prison. Michael's handwriting was different now, less arrogant, more cramped. Mr. Smith, I am writing this from a place I never imagined I would be. 18 months feels like forever when you have nothing but time to think about your mistakes. I was blinded by greed, the letter continued. I looked at you and saw a target instead of a person. I looked at Amanda and saw access instead of the woman I claimed to love. You were right to stop the wedding. You were right about everything. You gave me a lesson I will never forget. I do not expect forgiveness, and I do not deserve it. But Amanda deserves to know I understand what I did to her, and I am sorry. I hope she finds someone worthy of her. It was never me. Jennifer's letter was shorter, written on cheap, thin paper. Mr. Smith, I have lost everything. My license, my career, my savings, my brother, and my reputation. I am working in a call center making $11 an hour. Some mornings I do not want to get up, but I do, because I have to live with what I have done. You had every right to stop us. We planned something cruel and thought we would get away with it, because you were older and seemed alone. We were wrong about your circumstances, she wrote, but more importantly, we were wrong about who you are as a person. Thank you for not destroying me completely when you could have. I will spend years paying my debts, but at least I am free. That is more than I deserve. Amanda watched me fold the papers. What will you do? She asked. I thought carefully about the power I held in my hands. I wrote 2 responses. To Michael, I said, your apology is accepted. Use these 18 months to become someone different. The doors to my life and Amanda's are closed permanently, but the doors forward are always open if you choose to walk through them honestly. Learn from this. To Jennifer, I wrote, your apology is accepted. Rebuild your life with integrity. Stay away from my family, but know that I do not wish you continued suffering. Your consequences are appropriate, but consequences are not forever. Character changes are. I signed both simply as James Smith. Amanda read them over my shoulder. You are not forgiving them exactly, she noted. I am releasing them, I explained. There is a difference. Forgiveness would mean a restored relationship, and I am not offering that, but I am acknowledging their apologies and telling them to move forward. Justice does not mean I have to hate them forever. They paid the price. Now they need to do something useful with whatever comes next. That evening, we attended the charity exhibition at the De Young Museum. My collection was displayed with full authentication and provenance. The Keith Haring from my living room was there, along with several Basquiat works and early Banksy selections. My rare stamp sat under reinforced glass. Each piece had a small placard showing its true value. The exhibition was titled Wisdom and Worth, Protecting America's Seniors. I gave a short speech to the assembled crowd of San Francisco society, collectors, and media. I hid this collection for 15 years to protect my daughter, I told them. Then, someone tried to use my daughter to steal from me. I am showing you this tonight not to boast, but to make a point. Appearances deceive. Age does not mean vulnerability. Kindness does not mean weakness. Don't underestimate people and don't prey on those you think cannot fight back. Sometimes, I said, looking into the flashes of the cameras, they fight back perfectly. Applause filled the gallery, echoing off the high ceilings. Later, I watched Amanda talking with Jacob, the young museum curator who had helped organize the show. He was in his early 30s and genuinely enthusiastic about art. They had been seeing each other for a few weeks, and I had noticed but said nothing, letting her make her own choices. He was explaining the significance of a Basquiat piece, and Amanda was smiling. It was a real smile, not the forced one she had worn with Michael. Bob Chen approached me, following my gaze. "That is the curator, right?" he asked. "He seems better than the last one." "Substantially better," I agreed. "He hasn't asked about my net worth once." Bob laughed and raised his glass. "Low bar, but fair." Jessica joined us, her eyes scanning the room. "So, JS, now that you are public, what is next?" she asked. I told her I was thinking about making the fund permanent, maybe establishing a foundation and using the collection to teach people about protecting themselves. It seemed like a better legacy than just sitting in my living room. The exhibition ended, and the lights dimmed on the millions of dollars of art. Amanda and I drove home together through the quiet streets. "I am proud of you, Dad," she said. "You could have just called the police, but instead, you taught them a lesson they will never forget, protected other people from them, and turned it into something positive." I reminded her that I had resources most people did not. That is why the fund matters, helping people who do not have 50 million to protect themselves. At home, I returned to my study and pulled out a new acquisition, a penny black 1840 stamp I had purchased at auction for $300,000. I examined it through my magnifying glass, the detail incredible even after 185 years. I thought about the past 5 months, the canceled wedding, the investigation, the legal battles, and the final victory. But mostly, I thought about Amanda. She was safe, healing, and learning to trust again, but more carefully this time. The stamp went into its protective sleeve, and the album closed. Life continues. I am no longer hiding. The people who tried to use me are living with the consequences of underestimating wisdom, experience, and a father's love. The best revenge, I realized, was not destroying them. It was living well, openly, and making sure they could never do it again. That is justice. That is enough. Through the window, the San Francisco lights twinkled in the dusk. Somewhere in that city, Michael sat in a cell, and Jennifer worked late in a call center. They were living with consequences, but they were living. That is grace. The album on my shelf contained millions in stamps, and the walls held millions in art, but the real treasure was in the next room. My daughter was safe, happy, and wise now. That is the victory that matters. I turned off the study light and walked toward the sound of Amanda's laughter. The first few weeks after the De Young exhibition were a whirlwind of activity that I had not experienced in years. My identity as JS was the talk of the art world, and my phone did not stop ringing. Museums from London to Tokyo were reaching out, wanting to know if the legendary JS collection would finally be available for tour. But I stayed focused on the foundation. Jessica and I spent our mornings in her Montgomery Street office, filing the paperwork to turn my private wealth into a public shield. The Wisdom and Worth Foundation was officially born on a Tuesday morning. I funded it with an initial $5 million, the same amount we had sought in the countersuit against Michael. It was poetically appropriate. We opened a small office in the Richmond district, just a few blocks from my home. I didn't want a high-rise in the financial district. I wanted to be where the people were. We hired 2 social workers and a retired fraud investigator to staff the desks. Amanda took an active interest, helping us develop curriculum for local senior centers. She had a way of explaining complex financial concepts that made them accessible and less frightening. Watching her find her voice again was more rewarding than any auction win. She was no longer the easy target Michael had bragged about. She was becoming a guardian. One afternoon, a woman walked into the foundation office with a shaking hand and an envelope. She was 72, a widow, and her grandson had been asking her to sign some papers for a new business venture. She felt something was wrong, but didn't want to hurt his feelings. Our investigator looked at the documents and found a hidden power of attorney clause that would have given the grandson full control over her home. We stopped it that day. When I heard the news, I sat in my study and looked at the penny black. This is what the $85,000 for the wedding had really bought me: the clarity to see the world as it was and the means to change it. Michael and Jennifer had tried to steal a future, but they had accidentally built a fortress for others. By November, the dust had settled, but the impact remained. Michael had been moved to a minimum security facility to serve the remainder of his 18 months for tax fraud. Jennifer had disappeared into the anonymity of the East Bay, her real estate license gone, and her name a cautionary tale in local real estate circles. I heard through Bob Chen that she had started attending debt counseling sessions. It was a small step, but it was a step toward the integrity I had challenged her to find. Amanda's relationship with Jacob grew steady and deep. He treated her with a quiet respect that was the polar opposite of Michael's theatrical precision. When they visited for dinner, Jacob would ask me about the history of the stamps, not because of their price tag, but because of the stories they told about the world. He saw the value in the history, not just the hedge fund potential. I decided it was time to move some of the collection out of the house. Keeping $50 million in art and stamps in a Richmond district home was no longer just a secret, it was a liability. I organized a long-term loan to the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. The JS wing would house the Basquiats and the Herring, making them visible to the city I loved. The night before the movers arrived, Amanda and I sat in the living room with the walls already looking bare. "It feels different, doesn't it?" she asked. "It feels lighter," I told her. For years, these pieces were a burden I had to hide. Now they are just art again. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, the silence in the house didn't feel heavy with secrets. It felt like peace. A year after the wedding that never happened, I stood on the balcony of the Meadowood Napa Valley Resort. I wasn't there for a wedding this time. I was there for a regional conference on elder protection that our foundation was co-hosting. The oak trees and stone pathways were the same, but the feeling was entirely different. I didn't feel the wrongness settle in my chest. I felt a sense of completion. Amanda was there, leading a workshop on the emotional language of fraud. She told the story of the note in her pocket, her voice steady and clear before a room of 100 professionals. She didn't speak as a victim. She spoke as an expert who had survived the fire. When she finished, the room stood in a thunderous ovation. After the sessions ended, we walked through the vineyards as the sun began to set. I thought about the letters I had sent to the prison and the call center. I had no regrets about the justice we had served, and I had no regrets about the grace we had offered in the end. Life is a collection of rare moments, much like my stamps, and you have to know which ones are worth keeping and which ones are forgeries. We drove back to San Francisco as the city lights began to twinkle through the fog. I went into my study and opened my album to the very last page. There was no stamp there, just a small handwritten note Amanda had given me that morning. It read, "Thank you for seeing me, Dad. I'm finally home." I realized then that JS was no longer my most important identity. I was just James Smith, a father, a neighbor, and a man who knew exactly what his life was worth. I closed the book, turned off the light, and went to join my daughter for dinner. The game was over, and we had both won the only prize that mattered, the truth. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.